Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the conversation. In fact, welcome to episode 4. We're filming inside this time because the weather outside here in Germany is, quite frankly, too bitterly cold for the camera or for me. So we're inside this time. Let's jump into it and let's get started. Episode 4, of course, starts with the funeral in which Wilhelm is alone with his brother's casket inside of a cavernous church. I thought this was really good scene setting, really good stagecraft, because what we have here is, quite frankly, a small boy being surrounded by all this open space, all this dramatic, formal space, the inside of a church, of course. And I think that represents exactly how Wilhelm must be feeling at this point. Here he is alone with the body of the person that I believe he was the closest to on this planet. He's lost that person, and he must feel so overwhelmed by everything around him. Of course, we're only getting the director's perspective on this, but it appears to us that Simon is the only person who is reaching out to Wilhelm, and you can see that he's sending private texts and messages. And that got me to thinking about how many students at this school actually have Wilhelm's personal telephone number. Does Wilhelm carry a secure telephone like, heads of state do, like the President of the United States does, or the Chancellor of Germany? Or does he have a regular cell phone like everybody else, which I doubt? So it's just curious to me how many of his fellow students might have had, that information. One little detail that jumped out at me that actually got me to go onto the internet and do some searching is the fact that in the opening scene, we're seeing Wilhelm, his father, and his cousin August all wearing white neckties over the white shirts. I don't see anybody else doing that. When I went online and looked at Swedish royal members going to funerals, I found quite a few pictures of royals who were wearing, in fact, white ties over white shirts. And I thought, well, maybe that's something that's reserved for that sort of rank. But then I found other pictures where they were at funerals where the same royals were wearing dark ties over white shirts. So if that's a dress code, I couldn't find the definitive answer to it. So if somebody out there has that information, I would be curious. Immediately after the funeral, we get a glimpse inside the royal apartments of the family having dinner. First thing that got my attention was the fact that it is the father who is moving food from the countertop over to the table with Wilhelm's help. Only when the food is there does the queen enter the room. Makes me think that she doesn't participate in the preparation of the family meal. Now, that's a heck of a conclusion to reach because we have, a short glimpse of one meal together. So it may not be indicative of anything, but it did get my attention. What also got my attention was the fact that the father was quick to speak up for Wilhelm and say, hey, I think it's probably best for him if he goes back to school, stay with his friends, let's get some stability. But the queen, on the other hand, wants him to start participating in the daily briefings, start participating actively in the royal life, something that we all know Wilhelm doesn't have a particular taste for. But the thing that nerved me, and I'm sure it nerved a whole bunch of you, was the fact that she got her little jibes in there. For instance, she says, well, I knew my entire life that I was going to inherit the crown, and I prepared for it. Eric knew that he was going to inherit the crown, and he prepared his whole life for it. But Wilhelm's starting a little late, and the crown has to be preserved. The line of succession has to be preserved for both Wilhelm and his future children. Notice that he looked at her immediately when she said that. She immediately turned and looked away and started looking down at the table because we all know what the real conversation is here. So speaking of private time with family, let's talk about Simon, Linda, and Zara. Linda is sitting on the sofa with her children and she's opening the mail. She finds the letter from the school saying that, hey, Simon has to pay a certain amount for these tutorial lessons. She gets very angry, understandably, and she says, well, what are we talking about? What tutorial lessons and why are we paying for them? Simon replies with, well, my last test I got a C and I need to do better, so I got extra, I have to get extra classes, some tutoring in order to pass, get better grades. And she says, so no, if you didn't do well on your last test, you study harder. My words, not hers. If you didn't get the promotion at work that you think you deserve, you should work harder. That sort of thing. And I think she's coming from a place where she believes in this ideal world where hard work gets you to where you need to go or where you want to go. And she says, you don't pay to get ahead in life. That's just not the way it works. Well, Linda, I'm sorry. It kind of is the way it works. I think this is one of those moments when I'm going to disagree with Linda. We don't live in an ideal world. And too often, all other things being equal, you pay to get ahead in life. That's unfortunately just the way it is. I mean, there's always the instance where, somebody goes against the odds and reaches a crazy high goal. But by and large, most of us have to pay to get where we want to go in life. I'm an evidence man. Absolutely love interviewing witnesses, reading depositions, going over crime lab reports, looking at tire marks. Love that kind of thing. I love it because a good lawyer or a good investigator is going to use pieces of evidence to build a case, to take that case to its logical conclusion. What somebody should never do is try to reach a conclusion first and then try to look for the evidence to support it. No. Take the evidence you have, of course, continue to gather more evidence, and you go where it takes you. It's a very rare moment or situation in which you can see a crucial piece of evidence before it becomes a piece of evidence. This is what I mean. In this scene where August is posing and making videos of himself in front of his own handy is what we call cell phones here in Germany. So if I say handy, I mean cell phone. August is standing in front of his cell phone, taking video of himself. For those who've seen the entire series, you already know that this is the phone. This is the video that is later going to get August caught for some crimes that he's going to commit. If I had to give a title to this particular episode, I think I would call it Crime and Punishment, because after I took all my notes in preparation for this review, I realized that there were a heck of a lot of felony crimes committed in this episode. And I'm going to point them out, and I'm going to point fingers, and I'm going to make accusations. But I'm not going to jump ahead of myself. So while August is busy posing in front of his cell phone, the Queen calls. He takes the call, and she explains to him that now that Wilhelm is going to assume the duties of Crown Prince, he needs somebody to look out for him and watch out for him. And she's asked August to do this. Is this not exactly the kind of thing that would just make August's head blow up? Because that's exactly what it did. You can see him walking through the halls and pulling his closest confidant and saying, hey, the Queen asked me to look out for Wilhelm. Of anybody she could have called, she called me. She trusts me. And you could just, oh my God, I want to choke this man. And of course, August decides that Wilhelm needs to be inducted into the secret society. God, teenagers with their secret societies. So Wilhelm returns to school in a chauffeur-driven car, and in a separate car is his security detail. Now, I'd like to go off on a tangent for just a moment about his security detail, because this is a point in the story that I don't understand. What does he need security for? He hasn't been in danger all this time with the school anyway, so now that he's suddenly Crown Prince, he's in danger? That can't be it. So is it that simply because he is filling the role of Crown Prince, maybe by law, by rule, by custom, he has to have security? Maybe that's the case, but if so, that's dumb also. Because there's one scene, and I know that I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm on the topic of security, so let's talk about it. There's the one scene where August is bringing back Wilhelm's jacket to give to August in his room, and security stops him. Now, August is a member of the royal family. Surely he's got to be shortlisted for being allowed access to the Crown Prince. And yet they stop him in the hallway over a stupid jacket. Yet later in the same episode, when Wilhelm sneaks out the window to go to the security or to go to the secret society meeting, there's no security. So where was security during this time? And for that matter, when Wilhelm was in a football field, stoned out of his mind, he'd been missing for hours at that point. Was security not concerned in the slightest? I mean, sure, maybe they thought he was sleeping, but you've got to wonder how good is security when this 16-year-old can go get stoned and be in a field in a completely different town. Because if you'll remember, he has to take a bus to get to that town. Then there's the issue where Simon helps Wilhelm back to his school, to his bedroom at school. But he was a mess the night before. So did he help Wilhelm get showered? If so, how did Simon get past security? Even if forget the shower, how did they get back into the bedroom? Did they sneak in the window? Okay, that's a possibility. Maybe that's a possibility. But again, I'm going to ask, where the hell is security? But then the next morning, when Simon and Wilhelm are making love, nobody hears that. Security standing outside the door doesn't hear that and think, wait a second, how did a second person get in the room? I'm just saying, this whole issue with security has got me a little iffy, because I happen to know in later episodes they're completely missing in key scenes. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. By the way, I did go online and check to see what kind of security the royal family gets in Sweden, and in the official residence and in their personal residence, so to speak. Active duty Army and Reserve Army, including a handful of policemen, are tasked with protecting the royal family. Sometimes when they go out for state visits or state tours, they do get police security, but they also get private security when they go to other events. So, okay, take that for what it's worth. It seems to be a mishmash of security for the royal Swedish family. So Wilhelm returns to the school. He walks through the main entrance, and he's met by August, who gives a very emotional hug. And while I think it's really greasy and slimy, and it just, knowing what a snake August is, it bothers me that he's doing this in front of everybody. On the other hand, he's grieving also. He lost his cousin, and he was friends with Eric. And he and Wilhelm sort of are surviving this together as family members, so I can forgive it. Then Felice hugs him, and that was emotional. But you can see, again, let's go back to the slimy August, who keeps trying to steal time in front of the camera. He reaches over and touches Felice on the back as if to say, okay, enough already, back off of him. I mean, this dude is a jealous little person. So the school choir comes out and I guess sings a welcome song, or maybe a song of tribute to Crown Prince Eric, because we see his photograph propped up. But in what could be considered Wilhelm's first act as the Crown Prince, he stands up and gives a little speech. This was crucial in my opinion. I think this is a direct foreshadowing, and I don't think they're being subtle about it, to what's going to happen at the end of episode 2. If you compare the two scenes, think about it. Wilhelm stands up to give a prepared speech. He pulls the speech out of his pocket. He unfolds it. He thinks about it for a second. Then he folds the speech back again and goes on to say what he wants to say. This is exactly what happened at the end of episode 2. But I guess, maybe we shouldn't jump ahead, even though I just did. But again, I think this is a strong indication of where Wilhelm is going as a human being, developing as a character. Of course, in his speech, he says, my brother was a very kind man. He was my role model, and I want to live up to that. And in the royal apartment, of course, Queen Christina told him, listen, there can't be any more mistakes. So you need to toe the line. And I think at this point, Wilhelm feels crushed by his responsibilities, because the one thing he was absolutely trying to avoid was duty as a royal. And now he has taken over the role that his brother so much enjoyed. I think he's feeling crushed by the pressure of it. And that's going to cause him in the next scene to explain to Simon that, look, whatever we had, over, done. We're going to forget about it. We're going to move on, delete our text messages and whatnot. We can't do this, or I can't continue doing this. And very coldly, he walks out and leaves Simon sitting there. At this point, we know that Wilhelm feels alone in the world. He lost the closest confidant he had, Crown Prince Eric. I know I keep saying that. And he's now pushing his other confidant, Simon, away. And Simon also is feeling isolated, because if you'll remember in the last episode, his friends kind of backed away from him because of his behavior. And who does Simon turn to now? So on the one hand, his friends rejected him, and the one person he was, quite frankly, sacrificing so much for, which I'll talk about in a moment, Wilhelm's pushing him away. So we have both these young men who long to be together, truly, who are both separated from each other for the worst possible reasons and feeling completely isolated and alone. That sucks. So Simon goes to visit his father, knocks on the door, nobody answers. For some reason, the door is open and he can just easily walk in. How's that for safe? And he finds his father asleep on the sofa and makes the comment that his father's a worthless drunk, which I find kind of odd because nowhere in this scene do I see any alcohol bottles. Like nowhere in this scene. No beer, no wine, no hard liquor, no glasses, nothing. So how does he reach the conclusion that he's a drunk? Is it possible that he's got a cold and he took antihistamines and he's simply asleep in a deep sleep? Is that possible? Or maybe he's taking antidepressants that put him to sleep. I think it's unreasonable of Seaman to jump to the conclusion that he's a drunkard. And what's worse, at the moment he condemns his father for being a drunkard, he goes into his father's drawers and starts stealing medication. So let me go on a rant about Seaman for just a moment, because in this particular episode, he really ticked me off. On the one hand, he despises his father for being a drunkard, and supposedly he abandoned the family because of his drug addiction. Now, we actually don't know that. In no episode, in no scene have we been given any indication that his father is in fact a drug addict or chose drugs over his family. It could be that this man has serious medical issues that require him to use this medication, and I don't know, maybe he overused the medication and got addicted, which happens to a lot of people that get on painkillers. We don't know. But Seaman is happy to condemn him for it. And yet, Seaman went and got alcohol from his father illegally, gave it to minors illegally. That was in the first episode. Then he goes into his father's drawers and steals medication. Oh yeah, that's a felony crime. Takes that medication and gives it to August, and which, by the way, is a crime, and compels August to sell that medication in order to get the money in order to pay his father back for the alcohol that he illegally borrowed. I mean, we've got crimes everywhere. Seaman, what the hell are you doing? And how hypocritical can you be? That you condemn your father for these things and you're out there doing just as bad, if not worse, and you're doing it as a minor. Let me go a little further with my anger or disappointment with Seaman, because it bears talking about. And I know I'm jumping ahead in a few scenes, but it's best described right now as a unit. Seaman has rejected his father for being an alcoholic and a drug user, if not a drug addict. Pushes his father away. And yet, Seaman is more than happy to jump on a bicycle, drive to a football field to collect a, drunk and drug-ridden Wilhelm. He brings Wilhelm home, past security somehow, cleans him up, and instead of rejecting Wilhelm for being a drug user and an alcoholic, he instead makes love to him. Seaman, what are you thinking? Because this is just a gross double standard. And speaking of comparisons, and since I'm jumping around, let me jump to two other events. On the one hand, in the last episode, we know that Felice lowered her standards and went to August's room and had sex with him. I'm not going to say made love, had sex with him. And I'd like you in the comment section to tell me if you saw or felt the exact same way I did. When I saw Felice and August together in bed, I cringed. It was painful to watch. I don't want to go into detail for fear of sounding like a perv, but that scene was horrific, because notice that they're not facing each other. And I understand maybe she doesn't want to be vaginally penetrated for fear of pregnancy. Okay, I get that. But they're not even facing each other. There is no chemistry between them. It seems that August is literally just trying to reach climax and have done with it, like he's making a claim here. If we put that aside and compare it to Wilhelm and August, these are two young men who clearly care about one another. They are clearly, they're making love. And I thought it was a very interesting contrast between the two scenes, and I'm glad that the director or the screenwriters put it in the same episode, so it made it really easy for us to contrast. One of the things that makes for a good story is when you have a good character arc. I love when you have flawed characters, and at the end of the arc, you end up seeing this character come out on the better side. They come out a better person. They come out more developed. They come out more mature. Love that. And as I mentioned a moment ago, Seaman is a very flawed character, especially in this episode. Wilhelm is clearly a flawed character. August takes it to a whole nother level. But Felice is also a flawed character. We've seen that. In the last episode, you saw where her flaws came right out on the table at the banquet. Everybody got to see them because Sarah spilled the beans that basically everything that Felice had been telling her family had been a lie. And what I love about Felice here, one of many things, but one of the things I love about Felice is that she takes the initiative to go find Sarah at the bus stop, to talk with Sarah, and to make things right. She is very clearly interested in a meaningful friendship with Sarah. This incredibly wealthy girl from a powerful family wants to be close friends with this girl of the lower class. And I think that what that says about Felice, I think Felice sees people at the end of the day. I don't think she's so wrapped up in status. At least that's not what I see. Now let's talk about the criminal in chief. Let's talk about August. And again, I'm collecting several incidents out of this one episode and bringing them into one to make a point. And the point is that he's just an out and out criminal. At the end of the day, Felice comes into her bedroom and she finds that August is sitting in her room. Madison, her roommate, very clearly says, I told him not to come in and he came in anyways. And then he goes on this whole rigmarole about, well, why do you have Wilhelm's jacket? And you should be comforting me, not him. And, he just berating this woman who supposedly is his girlfriend. And then he storms out like a little princess. And Madison gives Felice excellent advice. Dump him. So let's think about this incident in isolation and then as part of a larger picture. August goes into a room that is occupied by two females, and he's asked to leave by one of the females, and he refuses to do so. That is criminal trespass. I think this is a pretty easy crime to charge and convict him for. But it doesn't just stop there. Later, we see him creeping outside of Wilhelm's bedroom window, and when he peeks inside and thinks that Wilhelm is in bed with a young lady, he pulls out his camera and starts taking a video, which in and of itself is a criminal violation of privacy under Swedish law. I did look it up. But it's also, because we're talking about two minors, manufacture and possession of child pornography. Those two more counts that we can add on. But let's not forget the fact that when Simon gave him the drugs and said, you need to sell these drugs in order to give me my money so I can pay my dad back, he agreed to do so. He could have turned Simon in, but no, he agreed. So now you have conspiracy to distribute narcotics and presumably sale of narcotics. So at this point, I'm racking up the felonies on him. And it just makes you wonder, what's going on in this episode? I mean, what is going on? Seaman is on a criminal rant, and August is on a criminal rant, but let's not leave Wilhelm out of it because he participated in underage drinking, and he, quite frankly, was in possession of illegal narcotics. Now, when I say illegal narcotics, let me back up. I don't know that they were narcotics, but he was in possession of medication that he did not have a prescription for, and that is a crime in every country in the European Union. So just wow, what the heck is going on in this episode? Okay, so we need to talk about the secret society for a moment. Okay. So the kids from these powerful, rich families have this society, and presumably that this society has existed long before these particular young men. It's probably been in this school for 100 years. And they invite Wilhelm in and they say, listen, anybody who's wealthy and a firstborn is welcome to join our club. And what we do is we have this mutual pact. We have this mutual agreement where we will support the crown, and the crown promises to support the historical noble families of Sweden. And Wilhelm has no problem saying, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Now, we're overlooking, of course, the fact that Wilhelm is not the firstborn son. And we're overlooking the fact, I guess, that when they say, oh, we voted unanimously to accept you, who was going to vote against the crown prince? Because the whole point of the society is to stay connected to the royal family and everybody in the nobility protect one another. So, of course, nobody was going to vote against him. But when they have this party, I think it's really interesting that there is a lot of alcohol in this party, and it made me think back to episode 1. Is this the leftover from the alcohol that Simon procured? And if it is, they drank so much alcohol in that first episode, and now they're drinking a whole lot more. How much alcohol was he able to get his hands on? My goodness. But as Audrey, who was on our staff, as she pointed out to me, in the first episode, somebody did make the statement that well, my source for alcohol is out of town at the moment and, can't be gotten a hold of. So maybe they do have another source of alcohol, but man, that's a lot of alcohol. So let's go back to Wilhelm for just a second and this oath that he makes to support these noble families. You and I both know he doesn't mean a word of it. He's in love with this commoner. And at the end of the day, if he has to choose between the nobles and the commoner that he loves, I mean, is there anybody that really doubts which decision he's going to make? And that's even if you haven't seen the rest of this season or all of season 2. Put all that aside. Do you really think for love he's going to support these nobles who are a bunch of alcoholic, drug-riddled teens? I don't think so. All right, let me bring up a topic that's probably been on your minds for a while, and that's urinating in public. I did some research and I found out that urinating in public in Sweden is a crime. There are exceptions, of course, when it's a true emergency and you just can't hold it anymore, or if it's a small child, or if you make some attempt to try to, shield yourself from public view and you're in a park or whatever. Okay, there's exceptions, but that's a rule. Here in Germany, where I live, urinating in public it's on the books, sort of, but unless somebody's really being flagrant about it, nobody gets prosecuted for it. And I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many times, without looking, I have seen people urinating in public here, from small children to adults. They just do it here. I almost sort of don't want to point this out because I don't want to be accused of being a pervert, but when I saw this scene, I saw something caught my eye because I have a tendency to look at where other people are looking. And it seemed to me that I saw something, so then I went and slowed it down and looked a little more carefully. And you be the judge. You tell me, is August really taking a peek at the crown jewels? Just saying. So now you have my thoughts and observations of episode 4. I am very interested to read in the comments section your thoughts or your responses to the 2 themes that I raised. Number 1, is in fact Seaman being a hypocrite? Is there another way to see this that I'm not seeing? And the second thing I'd like to know, and this is kind of an informal survey, do you think that August really was checking out Wilhelm's personal items? I just found that a really awkward scene. All right, my friends, thank you again for joining this conversation. If you like what we're doing and you'd like to see more of this type of content, if you'd like to support us, please consider going to Coffee and supporting us there. Thank you so much, and I'm already looking forward to seeing you in Stockholm in August, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode review. Take care of yourselves. Cheers.